Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, President Rodrigo Duterte says he'll protect what's ours.
If you get something there from the economic zone, I will order the Navy to fire.
But insists the country cannot go to war.
If the Aquino administration was not able to do anything about these artificial islands, what they want us to do?
With China's militarization in disputed waters,
our Constitution renounces war as an instrument of national policy, so we cannot go to war to enforce our rights in the West Philippine Sea.
And the Eastern Giant's naming of 5 Philippine rice features.
If you do not take the Chinese name, you can have your Filipino name. It's all right for us.
How can the Philippines assert its rights in a fight like David versus Goliath? Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio joins us live. And later, bring back the child in you with these 2018 toys. That's for today's In Focus. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. President Rodrigo Duterte says he will push the country's claims in the South China Sea and also insists on the country's rights over Benham rice or the Philippine rice. But the president stresses the need to maintain good relations with China. He points out China's military structures are not intended for the Philippines, which is even more reason for him not to escalate friction between the two nations. The statements were made amid criticisms that he's being too soft on China, but one man is taking a stand on these issues, saying the Philippines should be wary of China's words in disputed waters. Let's go straight to the source of the story, Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Sir, welcome to the show again. Good to have you.
Thank you, Pinky. Good morning to our viewers.
Hot topic again in the past couple of weeks, but I'm going to start with a statement made by DFA Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano. It doesn't seem new that he says that this joint exploration is being explored. To me, what was new, sir, was when he said that we are aggressively pursuing this. Would you agree, or is this something that you had known for quite a while?
Well, we have always wanted to extract the gas in Reed Bank because we are running out of gas in Malampaya in less than 10 years. And it's urgent that we have to get the gas. That's why probably he's saying that we have to aggressively pursue this. But Mr. Pangilinan of Forum Energy also did that during the Aquino administration. He negotiated with China National Offshore Oil Company, and they agreed on the commercial terms. I don't know the exact division of the revenue, but they agreed, and there was just one sticking point. China insisted that the Philippines concede that China owns the area, the Reed Bank, China's sovereign rights or sovereignty over the Reed Bank, and that's when the talks collapsed. So I think it will still boil down to that now. China will always insist that they have sovereignty over Reed Bank, and we cannot agree to that.
But if that was the case back then with MVP, sir, is there a possibility that that sticky issue might change now? Is it even a possibility, or is it really remote?
Well, they'll have to devise a way, but I don't know of a way, because China will insist that we concede, and no government can agree to that. No Philippine government can agree to that.
And just for the benefit of ourselves and our viewers, Senior Associate Justice Carpio, the Reed Bank is part of the exclusive economic zone.
Yes, it's within our EEZ. It's about 90 nautical miles from Palawan. Our EEZ is 200 nautical miles from Palawan.
In other words, napakalapit po niya sa Palawan, the Reed Bank. And Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano did say that he promised the Energy Department they will work on this dahil nga mauubos na yung gas explorations sa Malampaya. in about 8 years.
about that time.
So we really need to look into something, saan natin mapagkukunan yung energy. So the reed bank is there, which is part of the EEZ, that red line you see, that is the exclusive economic zone, which China is also claiming as part of their 9-dash line, which the UNCLOS, the PCA, has already said that there's basically, sir, no dash line. It doesn't exist.
That's correct.
No, sir, but it's not even a 9-dash line anymore, right? Isn't it a 10-dash line now?
Yes, the 9-dash lines are still growing. China added a 10th dash in 2013. So we have to be careful because the dashes are continuously being added by China.
Okay. Sir, how would a joint exploration, for example, because I remember Secretary Cayetano saying this will be within the Constitution and it will regard what is in the UNCLOS. I guess my question is, pwede ho bang we agree to the demand of China in the past that the reed bank will be theirs, and yet we explore, and that will still be in the ambit of the Constitution or the UNCLOS?
No, it will be against the Constitution if we agree that China has sovereign rights in reed bank. The only way it can be constitutional is for China to accept that reed bank, as ruled by the tribunal, arbitral tribunal, reed bank is part of the EEZ of the Philippines.
So you don't seem to have a problem if we do a joint exploration with China, as long as it is for the commercial viability and that we don't give up sovereign rights.
Yes, there's no problem. Right now, we get 40% of our gas, 40% of our energy requirement comes from Malampaya gas.
In Luzon, yeah.
In Luzon, and the operator there is Shell, which is 90% foreign-owned. So it doesn't matter whether it's a foreign-owned company or not, as long as they extract the gas under Philippine law.
Okay. I hope this is not an ignorant question, but because reed bank is part of the EEZ, the country's exclusive economic zone, aren't we better off exploring it with a non-claimant country?
Well, that's the ideal. We should get a partner who doesn't claim the same area. So it's rather absurd if we tie up with a country that's claiming the same area, and then you'll have this problem. They will demand that we recognize that they own it. We will demand that they recognize that we own it. So better to partner with a company that belongs to another state that doesn't claim a sovereignty over the area.
But why during the Aquino administration we were talking to China also?
Well, because if an agreement can be forged, we might solve the problem of the dispute.
Aha, because we were still hoping that back then there could be good talks, bilateral talks. Okay.
We might find a formula, but China insists that we recognize that they own the areas. That's where it got bogged down.
So I guess the point is, sir, we can go on with the exploration as long as we don't give up a reed bank as ours.
Yes,
okay.
That's the bottom line. We can never concede sovereign rights over the territory to another country.
Is it even possible that the Philippines will do that, sir? Even with this pivot to China?
Well, it will not be a constitutional act to concede reed bank to another state.
And this could be the subject of, lots of things.
Well, I don't think the Filipino people will agree to that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is it possible to be 50-50? Not just commercial. I mean, it's both ours. Pwede ba yun?
That's exactly what China wants. I think the strategy of China is to claim everything, but when negotiation comes, they will say, okay, let's split it. But they get already half of what really belongs to us. I think that's their bottom line. Eventually, because they have been saying that meet us halfway. Meet us halfway. I asked them, what do you mean by meet us halfway? Do you want to split the area? But they're very evasive because that's their end goal, really.
So when we talk about that, and then we talk about the militarization in the South China Sea, first I want to listen, let's take a listen to what the President said about the militarization in the South China Sea. Here's the President.
It's really intended against those who the Chinese think would destroy them, and that is America. Wala tayong kasali dyan. Then why would I go there bring my navy, my soldiers, my police, and everything, only to be slaughtered. I will not commit the lives of the Filipinos only to die unnecessarily.
Does the president make sense to you, sir?
Well, the president said that the South China Sea dispute is a dispute between China and the U.S. and we should not get involved. Well, there is a dispute between China and the U.S. That's freedom of navigation and overflight. We are not concerned with that because we don't have a navy that sails in the high seas and easy seas of the world. We don't have an air force that can fly in the high seas and easy seas of the world. That's a separate dispute. We have our own dispute with China. China wants to grab 80% of our EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. How large is that? That's, if you combine all the land area of the Philippines, it's about 300,000 square kilometers. That's about the area that China wants to grab from our EEZ.
In fact, I think China wants to grab about 381,000 square kilometers.
Yes,
Okay.
that's about it. So now the Chinese have installed military structures in the Spratlys. They have militarized those artificial islands. The president said those military structures are not directed at us. Those military structures are directed at the U.S. But every military and security analyst I know here in the Philippines and abroad agree that those military structures in the Spratlys are designed to enforce the 9-dash line as China's national boundary. In other words, those military structures are there to grab the EEZ of the Philippines because that's the only purpose of that. The Americans can destroy those structures anytime within a few minutes if there's a shooting war. So those structures don't bother the Americans, but they bother us because from those bases, the Chinese will enforce the 9-dash line. And that's exactly what they're doing now. They're shoving away when we sent a survey ship to Reed Bank to conduct seismic survey, their Coast Guard vessels shoved that survey ship away. So we have not surveyed Reed Bank since that time. That's 2011. So that's about 7 years ago.
And never again?
Yes, we have not sent back yet. Now, those Coast Guard vessels will be stationed there in the Spratlys. They can easily go to the Reed Bank because before they used to come from Hainan. It's very far. Yeah. So those military bases are being used to encroach on Philippine territory to see to it that we cannot get the gas in Reed Bank. So they are really directed at Philippine national security, Philippine national interests. The Americans are not bothered with those islands.
This is a national threat.
It's a national threat. It's because from those islands, fighter jets from the airfield on those islands can reach Palawan in less than 20 minutes. And the radar facilities in those islands can detect any aircraft that lands or takes off from Palawan. They can easily send patrols to the Reed Bank to stop us from getting the gas. So these islands that have been militarized by China in the Spratlys are daggers pointed at our national security.
How would you describe what government is not doing about it? But let me just say, though, that government is saying that they have filed protests. In fact, I think Secretary Cayetano was saying, unlike the previous administration, hindi lang kami maingay. Basically, that's what he was saying, but they were filing protests.
Well, I remember that Secretary Lorenzana said he would be asking the DFA to file the protest, but I have not heard the DFA say that they have filed the protest. Yeah. So if the DFA has filed the protest, they should make that public because Secretary Lorenzana himself said, I will ask the DFA to file a protest, but there's been no response.
How does that personally make you feel? Well, of course, having, being an expert on this, talking about this, defending this, knowing, the South China Sea, and seeing the government act the way it is acting right now?
Well, we have no choice but to continue defending our sovereign rights. I mean, if the present administration is sleeping on their job, it's our duty to wake them up and to tell them we have to protect our sovereign rights, because once we lose our sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea, we can never get it back from China. China will never return it.
We're done
We're
after
done.
that.
Yes.
So how do you strike a balance between this pivot to China and maintaining what is truly ours?
Well, we can continue our economic relations with China, we can trade with China, but there are so many ways to fortify the ruling to preserve our rights in the West Philippine Sea. Like, for example, we can agree with Vietnam and Malaysia for a sea boundary in the West Philippine Sea, and by signing a sea boundary agreement with them, we are fortifying the ruling, because the ruling states that there are no EEZs from those islands in the Spratlys.
Yeah.
And if there are no EEZs, there are no overlapping EEZs with Vietnam, with Malaysia, so we can sign now a sea boundary. And by state practice, we are enforcing the ruling. In fact, Indonesia recently renamed the sea around Natuna as the North Natuna Sea. And the premise of Indonesia is this, that since the tribunal said that the 9 dash lines have no legal effect, then we can name now Natuna's, the sea around Natuna as North Natuna Sea. So they have, in fact, by state practice, adopted the ruling. We can also file an extended continental shelf claim off the coast of Luzon, and the only country that can oppose that is China. If China does not oppose, then that will be awarded to us by the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, just like Benham Rice.
Yeah.
We filed a claim, nobody opposed, we got it. Now, if China opposes it, what will be the ground of China? China cannot use the 9 dash line anymore, because that has been invalidated by the arbitral tribunal. And the arbitral tribunal is a creation of UNCLOS in the same manner that the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf is. So China is in a dilemma. If China says we are opposing because the extended continental shelf of the Philippines overlaps with our own extended continental shelf, then I like that, because then China is now arguing on the basis of UNCLOS, and we like that.
Yeah.
We don't want China to argue on the basis of historic rights that since 2,000 years ago, they already own the entire South China Sea. I mean, if that is the argument, then Italy can claim the entire Europe, because the Roman Empire controlled the entire Europe, even UK, even in Eastern Europe.
And that could also be an argument on the other side of the South China Sea, which is the Philippine rights or the Benham rights. We'll be talking about that after the break. Before I leave this area on the South China Sea, did you find it, what were your thoughts on the president joking that, the Philippines could probably be a province of China? Did you find that funny?
Well, I don't think it's funny. I think, it's rather alarming, because that's exactly what's happening now. Russia has a very long border with Finland, and the word Finlandization has been coined to refer to a country that has lost its capacity to conduct an independent foreign policy. That country that has been Finlandized has to follow the bigger country in terms of its foreign policy. In other words, it's dictated with respect to foreign policy. That could happen to us, because China is claiming 80% of our EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. That means we will have a very long sea boundary with China, from Balabac Island, our southernmost island, to Yami Island in Batanes, our northernmost island. That's a sea boundary of 1,700 kilometers, and China is very near. What only separates that boundary and the Philippines is the territorial sea and the little EEZ. So what does it mean to have a very long sea boundary with China? Well, you ask the Finns. You ask Vietnam. It has a very long land boundary with China, and throughout its 1,000 years history, it has been fighting China on and off. China has occupied Vietnam, and then the Vietnamese were able to oust them, repel them. It's a constant struggle. And
but they're fighting.
But they're fighting, and as long as they're fighting, they can remain independent.
In fact, the Vietnam model has been discussed and used many times as a basis when the president says, "I cannot go to war with China." But we will be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Still to come, what should the Philippines do after China named 5 sea features in the Philippine Rise? Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio will still be with us after the break. watching us on Facebook, so we can still discuss. But I guess ako, sir, the biggest question really is the EEZ. Yun lang naman parang, why? Isn't there anything in the middle, di ba there's a red highlight, which is the EEZ, and then the blue highlight also. Wala bang structure na lang doon pwede nilang...
Well, there's none.
Kasi the reed is really on the EEZ,
Yeah. Well, the reed bank is shallow. It's a mount. So they can, if they want, they can put up an artificial island there.
Yeah. So is that the foremost consideration?
Well,
something that you can build on quickly?
yes, they can build. They have the capability because they have now a very big dredger. The biggest dredger was the one that they use in the Spratlys. They manufactured a bigger dredger now.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4 times.
Really?
With the capacity, the last one. So they can easily build an artificial island in Reed Bank.
All right. So we're going to go on air. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpe. Also, one argument, sir, that has been said time and time again, even I think it's Ambassador Chito Santoromano, we're saying that, with the bilateral talks with China, tension has been diffused significantly, and then they go to saying, in fact, our fishermen can now fish. When you hear something like that, is that like taking, how would you describe it? Is that good enough, or is it taking crumbs?
Well, we should always talk to China. There are many things to talk with China on the South China Sea, like safety at sea, the code for unintended encounters at sea, for anti-piracy, preservation of the marine environment. Let's talk with China. But we must remember that as we talk with China, China is building on its facilities in the Spratlys. In other words, China is taking advantage of time because China knows that they are rapidly developing their military, their navy, their air force. They're building those air and naval bases in the Spratlys. So time is on their side, and we have to be careful about that. So we cannot just talk to them without fortifying the ruling itself. At the same time, while we talk with them, we should do our own thing by fortifying the ruling. Okay,
let's go to the Philippine rise, the other side. Also, was it a surprise to you when you... Well, I read on this, sir, and then the sea features, the China name. They submitted this to a tribunal, I think back in 2000 and... I think it was 4, sir?
2014.
2014. And the names were recognized in 2016, 4 of them, and 1 in 2017. My point here is, sir, they named this even during the time of the Aquino administration. Can you help us understand this situation now?
Well, the Chinese submitted names, proposed names, within our EEZ. This is not even Benham rights. This is within our EEZ, where we have sovereign rights to living and non-living resources. Now, they said that they conducted the survey in 2002, 2004, but they never sought our permission. They cannot just go there to conduct a survey without getting permission from the Philippines. So that means they illegally surveyed, and then now they want the right to name. You can, under international law, you cannot acquire a right from an illegal act because their survey was unlawful. They cannot exercise the right to name
because so, they were parang fruit of the poisonous tree.
Yes, that's right. Now, however, under the naming of features, submerged features in the EEZ and extant continental shelf is governed by the guidelines of the International Oceanographic Commission and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. Rather, the first one is the International Hydrographic Organization, IHO. IHO and IOC. Now, they have a common guidelines how to name features. And if you look at these guidelines, it says there, if the national authority if the Philippines, we are the national authority, has designated an agency in the Philippines to approve names, proposed names for the EEZ and extended continental shelf, that authority, the action of that authority in approving the name prevails over the IOH and IHO. In other words,
So we just need to institute an agency.
Yes,
Okay.
we just have to name NAMRIA, for example, to be the authority to approve the names for EEZ, for our EEZ and extended continental shelf. Then IHO and IOC will no longer involve themselves in the naming, because in their own guidelines they state that if the national authority has named, if the coastal state has named a national authority to approve proposed names, then all the names must be
Then why
submitted
can't
to
we
that
just
national.
do that as soon as possible,
Yes,
sir?
that's what I've been proposing. The President should, by executive order, designate NAMRIA.
Okay.
That it is the sole authority in the Philippines to approve names for our submerged features in the EEZ and extended continental shelf. Then the Chinese will have to submit names to NAMRIA. They cannot go anymore to the IHO or IOC.
It's as if wala na. They don't exist once the Philippines names NAMRIA as the
because
agency.
the IHO and IOC realize or recognize that we have sovereign rights.
Right. Okay. But I have a question on that. Why would the IHO and the IOC allow the naming of China of sea features in the extended continental shelf of the Philippines, knowing that it's in the extended continental shelf of the Philippines?
Under the rules, they can do that because the Philippines has failed to name
the
a national
agency.
authority,
Got
an
it.
agency. All you have to do is name NAMRIA, and that's it.
Okay,
the problem is solved.
But sir, when you have the secretary as spokesperson, rather, Secretary Harry Roque saying that they're not making a big fuss out of this. Is this a big deal, sir?
Well, we must, legally it should not be a big deal.
Okay.
But you are dealing with China. China is claiming the entire South China Sea, about 85.7%. And it's the only country that's doing this. And no other country has the courage to claim an entire sea beyond the limits prescribed by UNCLOS. Now, what is the basis for China to claim the South China Sea? China is saying, we own the South China Sea since 2,000 years ago because we were the first to discover, name, and explore the South China Sea. Because of that, they're claiming the South China Sea. Now, China is saying, we were the first to discover, name and explore the Benham rice.
Okay.
These features. Down the line, maybe 100 years from now, they might claim also the Benham rice. It's not in accordance with the international law. That's illegal. But China doesn't follow international law.
Okay.
Because they have the naval might, they'll just do what they want.
So when you hear something like, Secretary Roque saying sa akin, di naman dapat masyadong maging alarmist pagdating dito dahil kung titingnan mo naman talaga, maraming binigyan ng pangalan ng China. Siopao, Mami, lahat naman yan binigay ng China na pangalan.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Beware.
Yeah, beware, because although it's against international law, China is using this argument. We were the first to discover, name, and explore the area, so it's ours.
Okay. All right. We're going to be... Do we still have time to go on a break? Okay, we're gonna go, didiretso na tayo, sir. Before you go, we have a couple of minutes left. Sir, I wanted to talk about, just very briefly, to be frank with you, I just kind of browsed through it in the Philippine Star, the recent ruling in the Supreme Court. Can you talk about that? Pwede ho ba, no?
Not yet. I think it's still under, there will be a motion for reconsideration.
This is the
Maria Clara
Doctrine.
Yeah.
Hindi pa po natin pwede pag-usapan yan.
Hindi pa kasi it's sub judice still.
Yeah, but okay, because they might file a motion for reconsideration
That's
on
right.
this. But just to give a brief background, it's about the reversal rather of a decision. All right, and I completely understand that. So, sir, where do we take it from here? The South China Sea, the do you still even call it Benham rice, or do you call it Philippine rice?
We
sir?
can call it either, but because it's popularly known abroad as Benham rice, I use the international name. But I use both.
Okay, what should we do from here on?
Well, first, we have to realize that China is grabbing 80% of our EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. Those military structures, artificial islands that have been converted into air and naval bases in the Spratlys, are being used by China to enforce its claim, to enforce its seizure of our EEZ. And we have to acknowledge that because, you know, that's a fact. You ask anybody, a military analyst here in the Philippines or abroad, that's given already. So we must tell it truthfully to our people that those artificial islands with air and naval bases will be used to grab Philippine EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. We must tell truthfully our people this fact. And then what do we do after that? I've proposed so many things like sea boundary agreement with Malaysia, with Vietnam, filing extended continental shelf claim in the South China Sea off the coast of Luzon. Yeah. We can also send our seismic vessels, survey vessels to Reed Bank.
Yes.
Now, if China stops our seismic vessel, we can go now to an UNCLOS tribunal and tell the tribunal, you gave us Reed Bank, it's ours, all the resources there, all the gas belongs to the Philippines, but China is preventing us. We are being damaged because we need that gas. Yeah. Then we can demand actual damages.
All right. Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio, sir, pleasure to have you. Maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Thank you, Pinky.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.